The moment I stepped through the front door, the air felt different. Stale, somehow. It was just past noon, and the house was quiet. Too quiet for a Saturday. I'd just gotten back from a 10-day marketing conference in Chicago, and all I wanted was my own bed. My shoulders ached from the carry on, and my eyes felt gritty from the red eye. My name is Elena, and at 32, I'd spent the last 5 years being the invisible glue holding my family together. Ever since the financial collapse that nearly cratered us, I'd been the one quietly paying the mortgage, covering the bills, making sure everything stayed afloat. I dragged my suitcase down the hall towards my bedroom, already picturing the soft mattress. But when I reached the door, it was closed. Not just closed, but locked. My heart gave a little stutter. That was weird. I tried the handle anyway, just in case. Locked. Then I saw them. My boxes. Stacked neatly against the wall just outside my door. My old college textbooks, my collection of vintage cameras, my winter coats, all of it, packed up. A high pitched yelp came from inside the room. Not human. A dog. Before I could even process it, Samantha emerged from the living room, a wide, almost sickeningly sweet smile plastered on her face. She was 29, 3 years younger than me, and looked like she'd just stepped out of a spa. Her hair was perfectly styled, her new wedding ring glinting on her finger. "Oh, hey, Elena, you're back," she chirped, as if she hadn't just orchestrated a hostile takeover of my personal space. "What's going on, Sam?" My voice was flat, betraying none of the sudden ice that was creeping into my veins. I gestured vaguely at the boxes. She shrugged a little too casually. "Oh, things are just a bit different now." She leaned against the doorframe of my room, her posture radiating smug satisfaction. "You'll understand soon enough." A low growl rumbled from behind her. It was Buster, her scruffy terrier mix. He was usually kept at Corey's place, her new husband. "Buster's in my room?" I asked, my voice still dangerously calm. "Well, our room now," she corrected, her smile widening. "He needed a bit more space. And it's the biggest one." My parents, Hazel and Jorge, materialized from the kitchen, drawn by the sound of voices. My mom, Hazel, 58, clutched a dish towel, her eyes darting between Samantha and me. My dad, Jorge, 61, stood a step behind her, his usual passive aggressive silence amplified. They both avoided my gaze. "Elena, dear, welcome home," Mom said, her voice a little too bright. "How was Chicago?" "Fine, Mom. What's going on with my room?" I didn't mince words. Dad cleared his throat. "Well, Elena, your sister, she's just moved in. With her husband's business being a bit up and down. Family helps family. And she's in my room?" I repeated, the calm cracking. "It's just for a bit, honey," Mom interjected, wringing the dish towel. "We thought, with you traveling so much for work, it made sense for Samantha to have the bigger space. For her and Corey. And Buster, of course." "We're all family, Elena," Dad added, parroting Mom's sentiment. "We have to share. Take turns." Share. Turns. My blood ran cold. I was the one who'd paid off every single penny of their enormous mortgage 2 years ago. The one who'd quietly taken on the role of provider for this house, the house that, unbeknownst to them, I legally owned. The deed was in my name, a fact I'd insisted on when the bank finally transferred the title. I took a deep breath, forcing a placid expression onto my face. "Right, sharing, of course." I turned my back on them, the polite smile fixed, and headed straight for the basement door. "Where are you going, dear?" Mom called after me, her voice laced with a hint of suspicion. "Just need to grab something from storage," I replied, not looking back. "Don't worry about it." I descended the creaky wooden stairs into the cool, damp basement. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and dust. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of rage and disbelief. Something told me to check the bottom file drawer of the old metal cabinet, the one where Dad used to keep his financial records. It was a long shot, a gut feeling. My fingers fumbled with the rusted handle. It squeaked open. Inside, beneath a stack of old utility bills and expired warranties, was a crisp, official looking document, a lease agreement. My eyes scanned the names listed: Hazel Tran, Jorge Tran, Samantha Tran, Corey Vasquez, and then the property address. Our house. My name wasn't on it. Not anywhere. Not as the landlord, not as a tenant, not even as an occupant. This wasn't a temporary arrangement. This was a secret lease, a lease to evict me. I stood in the dusty basement, the lease agreement clutched in my hand, the words blurring. Hazel Tran, Jorge Tran, Samantha Tran, Corey Vasquez. My name, Elena Tran, was conspicuously absent. It was a punch to the gut, a betrayal so cold it left me breathless. This wasn't just my room they'd taken. They were trying to erase me from the very foundation I'd built. My mind reeled back 2 years. I was 30 then, still reeling from the financial fallout that had hit our family 5 years prior. That was when Dad's construction business went belly up, leaving us drowning in debt and facing foreclosure. I was 27 then, fresh out of college, and had just started my first real job. I'd stepped up, pouring every spare cent into keeping the house, paying off the monstrous mortgage. It had been a slow, agonizing climb, but I'd done it. 2 years ago, the final payment cleared. I remembered the call from the bank, the quiet satisfaction of knowing it was finally done. I'd gone to the bank in person, sat across from the loan officer, and insisted on one thing: the deed had to be in my name. Not joint, just mine. They'd looked surprised, but I was firm. "I'm the one who paid it off," I'd said, my voice steady. "I need the security." My parents had been vague about it, waving it off as just a formality when I mentioned it. They'd trusted me, or perhaps they hadn't cared enough to question it. Too relieved the burden was lifted, I'd walked out of that bank holding the official document, the property title, with my name, Elena Tran, printed clearly as the sole owner. I'd filed it away in a fireproof safe, a quiet testament to my sacrifice. Now, standing in the basement, holding this fraudulent lease, I felt a surge of grim satisfaction. Thank God I had insisted on that legal documentation. My foresight, often dismissed as being overly cautious, was now my shield. My initial shock quickly morphed into a cold, calculated fury. My strategic mind, the one that excelled at marketing campaigns and financial projections, kicked into overdrive. I pulled out my phone. First, I photographed the lease agreement from every angle, making sure the dates, names, and signatures were clear. Then, I went to my fireproof safe, retrieved the original deed, and photographed that too, placing it back securely. I spent the next hour in the basement meticulously gathering evidence. I logged into my online banking, screenshotting every single mortgage payment I'd made over the last 5 years. I pulled up old utility bills, property tax statements, insurance premiums, all paid from my accounts. I scrolled through my emails, searching for any correspondence with the bank, with contractors for repairs I'd funded, anything that proved my financial contribution and ownership. I even found old text messages with my mom where she'd casually mentioned needing money for a plumbing issue or a new water heater, and my replies confirming I'd sent the funds. I organized everything into a new, encrypted folder on my laptop, a digital fortress of undeniable facts. As I worked, my fingers flying across the keyboard, I pulled up my best friend, Paige Long's contact. Paige, 33, was a financial advisor and my rock. She was the only one who truly understood the quiet burden I carried. We'd met in college, and she was the grounding force to my sometimes overthinking nature. I sent her a quick text: "Call me. ASAP, family emergency. And bring wine." Her reply came instantly: "On my way. You okay?" I wasn't okay, but I would be. This wasn't just about my room anymore. This was about a complete disregard for everything I'd done, a profound betrayal that went deeper than just taking my space. It was a calculated move to push me out, to exploit my generosity. My parents, with their family first facade, had been complicit in this. They'd let Samantha, with her entitled charm, walk all over me, all of us. I continued sifting through old files, looking for anything else. That's when I found it. Tucked away in a folder labeled Family Photos 2023 on the shared family cloud drive that my mom used to back up everything was a screenshot. It was a text message conversation between Samantha and my mom. "Samantha, so, Once she's gone, we can Airbnb the second floor, right? Corey says it's a gold mine. Mom, we'll talk, honey. Don't rush things. But yes, it's a good idea for extra income. My breath hitched. The second floor. My floor. The floor I'd paid for. They weren't just moving me out. They were planning to profit from my sacrifice. That's when the last sliver of my accommodating nature shattered. A cold, clear resolve settled over me. This wasn't a family squabble. This was a business transaction, and they had just made me the landlord. I knew exactly what I had to do. Paige arrived an hour later, a bottle of my favorite Cabernet Sauvignon in hand. I met her at the door, ushered her into the living room, and then, in a hushed voice, recounted everything: the locked door, the boxes, Samantha's smugness, my parents' avoidance, and finally, the lease agreement I'd found in the basement. I showed her the photos I'd taken, the bank statements, the text exchange between Samantha and Mom. Paige listened, her expression shifting from concern to disbelief to a quiet fury that mirrored my own. "Elena," she said, her voice low, "this is beyond messed up. They're trying to squat in your house." "And then Airbnb it," I added, showing her the text. "The second floor, my floor." She shook her head, taking a long sip of wine. "Okay. So, what's the plan?" "The locks," I said, the words coming out with a chilling clarity. "First, the locks. And then the eviction notice." Paige nodded, her eyes glinting with understanding. "Good. You own the place. You have the right." The next morning, a Saturday, I made the call. I scrolled through my contacts, past old college friends, past work colleagues, until I found the name: Leandro Ford. He was 36 now, a few years older than me, and ran a successful locksmith company in the city. We'd dated briefly in college, a whirlwind of late night study sessions and shared ambitions. It hadn't lasted, but we'd parted amicably. "Leandro Ford Locksmith," his voice answered, professional and calm. "Leandro, it's Elena Tran." There was a beat of silence. "Elena? Wow. Long time no hear. What can I do for you?" His voice held a hint of surprise, a warmth I hadn't expected. "I need all the locks changed at my house," I said, cutting straight to it. "Front door, back door, basement, and the side entrance. The whole 9 yards. As soon as possible." "That's a big job," he replied, a slight pause. "Everything okay?" "Not really," I admitted, a dry laugh escaping me. "It's a family matter. I need it done, discreetly, if possible, and quickly." "Discreetly, quickly. Got it," he said, his tone shifting to pure professional. "I can fit you in this weekend. How about Sunday morning, before noon?" "Perfect," I said, a sense of relief washing over me. "Thank you, Leandro." "No problem, Elena. See you Sunday?" With the locks handled, I turned my attention to my immediate living situation. My boxes were still piled outside my former room, which now echoed with the occasional bark of Buster. I couldn't stand being in the house, knowing Samantha and Corey were essentially squatting in my space, while my parents pretended everything was normal. I moved into the guest room, a small, rarely used space on the first floor. It was cramped, but it offered a temporary sanctuary. Over the next 2 days, while my family was out, I quietly began removing my valuables from my old room: my grandmother's antique locket, my passport, my essential documents, my laptop, a few sentimental photos. I packed them into a small duffel bag and put them in the trunk of my car. I also moved my financial records, the deed, and all the evidence I'd gathered into a secure off-site storage unit. I wasn't leaving anything to chance. Life in the house became a bizarre, silent play. I'd come home from work, and Samantha would be lounging on the couch, watching TV, Buster snoring at her feet. Corey, 31, her husband, would be in the kitchen, nursing a beer, always looking slightly uncomfortable. He ran some kind of online reselling business that seemed to be perpetually just about to take off. My parents, Hazel and Jorge, maintained their carefully constructed facade of normalcy. I'd hear Samantha arguing with Mom about curtain colors for my room. "No, Mom, the beige is so blah. We need something with more pop." "Corey agrees, right, babe?" Corey would mumble something noncommittal. I'd just walk past, offering a tight smile, pretending not to hear, my mind already miles away, planning. The calm I projected was a carefully constructed mask. Inside, the rage simmered, a cold, hard knot of resentment. One night, late, I couldn't sleep. I'd been lying awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, when I heard hushed voices from the living room. It was past midnight. My dad and Corey. I crept out of my room, moving silently down the hall, and paused just out of sight, listening. Just need her signature, Corey was saying, his voice low and strained. Samantha said she'd handle it. Said Elena would be fine with it for family. I don't know, Corey, my dad replied, his voice a gravelly whisper. Forging a signature? That's serious. And using the house as collateral again? Elena paid it off. It's just a bridge loan, Jorge, Corey insisted. A short term thing for my business. Samantha said Elena's so busy with work she wouldn't even notice. We just need to get the paperwork through. It's for the family, right? For our future. My blood ran cold, forging my signature on a loan, using my house as collateral, the house I owned, the house I'd paid for. This wasn't just about moving me out. This was about stealing from me, plain and simple. They were trying to leverage my property, my hard earned security, for their own gain. The rage that had been simmering finally boiled over. They were going to regret this. Sunday morning dawned crisp and clear, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I'd barely slept, the overheard conversation between Corey and my dad replaying in my mind. Forging my signature, using my house as collateral. It was a line crossed, a betrayal so profound it solidified my resolve. No more accommodating, no more de escalating. This was war, and I was done being the silent pillar. Leandro arrived promptly at 9 a.m., just as my parents, Samantha and Corey, were piling into the car, heading out for their usual Sunday brunch at the local diner. Samantha, still oblivious, waved cheerfully. Bye, Elena. See you later. I offered a small, noncommittal wave back, a tight smile on my face. Have fun. Leandro, 36, was as professional as ever. He carried his toolbox with an easy grace, his dark hair falling over his forehead as he surveyed the locks. Okay, Elena, show me what you've got. I led him through the house, pointing out each door. He worked efficiently, quietly, the soft whir of his drill the only sound. We didn't talk much, just the occasional instruction from me, a quiet confirmation from him. His presence was grounding, a calm anchor in the storm of my emotions. As he replaced the old locks with new, high security ones, I felt a physical shift, a reclaiming of my space. Each click of the new tumblers was a small victory. By 11:30 a.m., just as the brunch crew would be finishing their pancakes, the job was done. All the exterior doors now had new, unpickable locks. Leandro handed me a small bag with several sets of new keys. That should do it, he said, his eyes meeting mine. There was a flicker of concern in their depths, a silent question. Thank you, Leandro, I said, my voice steady. You have no idea how much this means. He gave a small nod. Any time, Elena, seriously, if you need anything else. After he left, I walked through the house, a strange sense of power settling over me. It was quiet, empty. My house. I went to the guest room, retrieved the typed notice I'd prepared the night before, and a roll of heavy duty packing tape. The notice was simple, direct, and devoid of emotion. To the occupants of property address. Your eviction notice starts today. You are hereby notified that your occupancy of the above referenced premises is terminated effective immediately. You are required to vacate the property within 24 hours. Failure to comply will result in further legal action. The landlord. I taped it to the front door, right at eye level, ensuring it was impossible to miss. Then I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and waited. It wasn't long. Around 1 p.m., I heard the familiar rumble of my dad's old sedan pulling into the driveway. The car doors slammed. Then silence, a beat of confused silence. Then the first scream. Samantha, what the hell is this? Her voice, usually charming, was shrill, laced with disbelief. My parents and Corey emerged from behind her, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning horror as they saw the notice. Elena! My mom shrieked, her voice cracking. What have you done? I walked out onto the porch, my expression carefully blank. My parents, Hazel and Jorge, stood frozen on the front lawn, their faces pale. Samantha, 29, looked like she might spontaneously combust, her eyes wide with fury. Corey, 31, looked utterly bewildered, his brunch induced complacency shattered. Buster, sensing the tension, started barking frantically from behind the locked door of my former bedroom. I've changed the locks, I stated, my voice calm and clear. And that's your eviction notice. You have 24 hours to vacate. You can't do this, Samantha screamed, running towards the door and rattling the handle. This is our house. Mom! Dad! It's not your house, Samantha, I said, my voice cutting through her hysterics. It's mine. I own it. What are you talking about? My dad, 61, finally found his voice, a tremor in it. This is our house, Elena. We bought it? You bought it, Dad, I corrected, but I paid it off. Every single penny of the mortgage. And when I did 2 years ago, the deed was transferred into my name. I am the sole legal owner of this property. That's a lie, Samantha shrieked, her face contorted. You're lying. Mom, Dad, tell her she's lying. My mom, 58, looked like she was about to faint. Elena, please, this is family. We can talk about this. We tried talking, Mom, I said, my gaze unwavering. For 5 years, I've been talking. I've been paying. While you and Dad let Samantha move in, take my room, and then you all signed a lease agreement behind my back to evict me and rent out my property for profit. And then, Corey, you and Dad discussed forging my signature on a loan using my house as collateral. Corey flinched, his eyes darting to Samantha, who looked utterly stunned. I'm calling the police, Samantha yelled, pulling out her phone. Go ahead, I said, crossing my arms. I've already called them myself. They're on their way, and I have the deed right here. I pulled the official document from the folder I was holding it up for them to see. Within minutes, a patrol car pulled up. Neighbors, drawn by the commotion, started peeking out from behind curtains, some even stepping onto their lawns, watching the spectacle unfold. It was brutal, public humiliation. The officers listened patiently as Samantha, hysterical, tried to explain that I was kicking them out of their own home. My parents, trying to save face, mumbled about a misunderstanding. Then it was my turn. I calmly presented the deed, explained the situation, and showed them the fraudulent lease I'd found. The officers reviewed the documents, their expressions grim. Ma'am, one of the officers said to Samantha, his voice firm, she's the legal owner. You have no right to be here. You need to vacate the premises. Samantha rounded on Corey, her eyes blazing. This is your fault. You said she'd be easy. You said she wouldn't care. Corey, looking utterly defeated, mumbled, I thought I thought you handled it. The first cracks in their marriage exposed for the entire neighborhood to see. As the officers supervised them gathering a few essentials, I walked back inside, the deed still in my hand. My eyes caught a piece of paper sticking out from under the doormat just inside the front door. It was an envelope, addressed to me from a local credit union. I opened it. Inside was a copy of a loan application for a significant amount, and there at the bottom was my signature, clearly forged. It had already been submitted. The forged loan application, still warm from the printer, felt like a live wire in my hand. My signature, crudely imitated, stared back at me. This wasn't just an attempt to kick me out, it was outright fraud. A felony. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from a cold, righteous anger. They hadn't just tried to take my home, they'd tried to steal my financial future. I called Paige immediately. She arrived within 20 minutes, her face grim as I showed her the document. This is serious, Elena. Paige, 33, said, her voice tight. This is identity theft. And using your property as collateral without your consent? That's a felony. You need to go to the credit union first thing tomorrow. The next morning, I did exactly that. I walked into the local credit union, the forged application, and my original deed in hand. I explained the situation to a bewildered loan officer, then to a branch manager. They were shocked. The loan hadn't been processed yet, thankfully, but the application was indeed active. Samantha had faked a power of attorney document, a flimsy, poorly executed forgery that wouldn't have held up under scrutiny, but it had been enough to get the ball rolling. This is a criminal matter, Ms. Tran, the manager said, his face serious. We'll flag this application immediately and launch an internal investigation. Do you want to press charges? The question hung in the air. Press charges against my sister, my family. It was a choice between scorched earth and what? More betrayal? More quiet suffering? My resolve, tested by the public confrontation yesterday, hardened. They had chosen this path, not me. Yes, I said, my voice steady. I want to press charges. The credit union initiated the process, and I spent the rest of the day providing statements to the police. The officers who had been at my house yesterday were already familiar with the family drama. They took my statement about the forged power of attorney and the loan application. They informed me that given the evidence, an arrest warrant for Samantha and possibly Corey would likely be issued. News travels fast in our neighborhood. The public spectacle of the eviction, the police presence, it had been impossible to ignore. By that evening, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts from family friends, distant relatives. My dad, Jorge, 61, called first, his voice hoarse, begging, Elena, please, don't do this. Think of your sister. Think of the family name. This will ruin us. You ruined us, Dad, I said, my voice flat, when you let her sign that lease, when you let her try to steal my house, when you let her forge my name. It was just a mistake, honey. My mom, Hazel, 58, pleaded, calling minutes later. Her voice was thin, on the verge of tears. Samantha didn't mean it. She was desperate. Please, for your mother, don't do this to your sister. Desperate doesn't excuse fraud, Mom, I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. And I'm done being the one who cleans up everyone else's messes. The community's reaction was immediate and divided. Some friends, those who knew the history of my financial support for my parents, quietly sided with me. It's about time you stood up for yourself, Elena. One elderly neighbor, Mrs. Davies, whispered to me over the fence. Others, particularly those who only saw the surface level drama, shamed me. How could you do that to your own family? Blood is thicker than water, Elena. The judgment was a heavy weight, but it didn't sway me. I had chosen scorched earth, and I had to see it through. Samantha, meanwhile, spiraled. She called me, screaming, blaming everyone but herself. You're a monster, Elena. You're just jealous. This is all your fault. She tried to paint herself as the victim, a poor newlywed struggling to make ends meet, targeted by her cruel, unfeeling older sister. Her social media posts were full of cryptic laments about toxic family and unjust persecution. The house, now empty of my family's presence, felt eerily quiet. I spent the evening going through the rooms, a strange mix of relief and emptiness settling over me. Buster's dog bed was gone from my old room. Samantha's clothes were gone from the closet. It was just quiet. Just as I was about to head to bed, my phone rang. It was Leandro. Elena, it's Leandro. I just got a call from a friend of mine, another locksmith. He said someone tried to break into the lockbox outside your basement door earlier today, the one for the utility company. My blood ran cold. The lockbox. It was old, but it was where I'd kept a spare key to the basement, just in case. And more importantly, it was where I'd put the file with the original deed after showing it to the police yesterday, thinking it was safer there than in the house while my family was still around. What? I breathed, my heart pounding. Was anything taken? He said it looked like they tried to force it open, but it held. He just wanted to give you a heads up, Leandro said. But I also heard something else. Through the grapevine, Corey's missing. And apparently, so is a file from your house with a title in it. My stomach dropped. Corey, the file, the original deed. It wasn't just about the loan application anymore. They were trying to steal the house permanently. Leandro's words echoed in my ear. Corey's missing. And apparently, so is a file from your house, with a title in it. My heart hammered against my ribs. The original deed, the one I'd shown the police, then, foolishly, temporarily, put in the old utility lockbox outside the basement door, thinking it was a secure, obvious place. My stomach dropped. They weren't just trying to get a loan, they were trying to steal the house out from under me. I immediately called the police again, reporting the attempted break in and the missing deed. They took my statement, but without a forced entry, it was hard to prove anything concrete. Still, they noted it down. The next few days were a blur of legal consultations and police updates. The arrest warrant for Samantha and Corey for fraud was issued. The credit union was cooperating fully, their internal investigation confirming the forged power of attorney. Then, 3 days after the eviction, Corey Vasquez, 31, was found. He hadn't gone far, just to a cheap motel a few towns over. He was picked up by the police, and under questioning, he broke. He revealed everything. He and Samantha, 29, had invested heavily in a new online venture of his, a cryptocurrency scheme that had promised quick returns but had instead spectacularly imploded, leaving them in a mountain of debt. They were desperate. Samantha had convinced him that the house was their only way out. She'd promised him that I, Elena, 32, would listen to reason once they were settled in, that I would understand it was for the family. She'd been the one to forge the power of attorney, to fill out the loan application. And when the eviction happened, she'd panicked, insisting they needed the original deed to prove ownership, to somehow reverse my claim. Corey, spineless as ever, had tried to retrieve it from the lockbox but couldn't force it open and had fled in a panic. The deed was still safe in the lockbox, untouched. My temporary, foolish hiding spot had actually worked. The police had enough. Corey was charged as an accomplice, though his cooperation would likely lead to a lighter sentence. Samantha was facing the full weight of the fraud charges. The news of Corey's confession and the details of the fraud spread through our community like wildfire. It was no longer just about me evicting my family, it was about outright theft and manipulation. I knew I couldn't control the narrative on the street, but I could control it online. I sat down at my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. I opened a new post on our neighborhood's private Facebook group. I typed, anonymously at first, a long, detailed account of everything that had happened. I didn't use names, but the details were specific enough that anyone who knew our family would recognize the story. I talked about the years of financial support, the quiet sacrifices, the expectation of loyalty. Then, the discovery of the secret lease, the eviction, the forged loan application, the attempted theft of the deed, and finally, Corey's confession. I included screenshots of the fraudulent lease, the text messages, and the forged loan application with identifying information blurred out. I signed it, a neighbor who believed in family. The post went semi viral within hours. The comments section exploded. People I knew, people I didn't, all weighing in. Some were sympathetic, horrified by the level of betrayal. Others were still judgmental, accusing me of airing dirty laundry, but the facade was destroyed. My family's carefully constructed image of unity and respectability lay in tatters. Samantha, still spiraling, tried to get sympathy. She posted vague, self pitying updates on her own social media, hinting at unjust accusations and family drama orchestrated by a jealous sibling. But the details from my anonymous post were too specific, too damning. Her attempts at victimhood rang hollow. My parents, Hazel and Jorge, faced social exile among their old friends. The phone calls stopped. Invitations to community events dried up. The whispers followed them everywhere. My dad, usually so stoic, looked shrunken, defeated. My mom, the master manipulator, looked genuinely lost without her usual audience. They were facing the consequences of their complicity, of enabling Samantha's entitlement and greed. I leaned into the awareness that I was no longer invisible. The quiet, accommodating daughter was gone. In her place was someone who had been pushed too far, someone who had chosen justice over peace. As the story continued to spread, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. It was an email, too, from an investigative reporter at a local newspaper. They had seen the anonymous post, heard the whispers. They wanted to feature my story in a piece about modern financial abuse within families. They wanted to talk. My story, once a private agony, was about to become public. The email from the investigative reporter sat in my inbox, a stark reminder that my private nightmare was now public fodder. I hadn't responded yet. The idea of laying bare every painful detail for a newspaper article felt like another violation, even if it was on my terms. But the thought of silence, of letting my family's narrative fester, was worse. Weeks passed. The legal wheels turned slowly but inexorably. Samantha, 29, and Corey, 31, officially separated. The fraud charges against Samantha were moving forward, and Corey, due to his cooperation, was facing a lesser charge, likely probation. I served Samantha with final legal papers, trespassing charges for her continued presence in the house after the eviction notice, and the fraud charges related to the loan. There was no going back now. The ripple effects of my actions spread through the family like a shockwave. My mom, Hazel, 58, suffered a health scare. Nothing life threatening, but serious enough to land her in the hospital for a few days. The doctors attributed it to stress. My dad, Jorge, 61, called me from the hospital, his voice thin and reedy. Elena, your mother. She's not well, he said, his voice cracking. Please, can't we just make this stop? For her? Dad? I said, my voice flat. This stopped being about making it stop when you and Mom signed a fake lease to kick me out of my own home and let Samantha try to steal my financial future. The consequences of your choices are not my burden to bear. He hung up without another word. He tried to rebuild burned bridges with old friends, but the damage was done. The community, once divided, had largely turned against them as the full scope of Samantha's fraud and my parents' complicity became undeniable. The weight of revenge was heavy. It wasn't sweet, as I had imagined it might be. It was sobering. I had achieved justice, yes, but at what cost? My family, fractured beyond repair, was a wasteland of broken trust and resentment. I found myself sitting alone in the quiet house, the silence deafening, wondering if the peace I'd gained was worth the loneliness. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Eris. She was a new character in my life, a necessity I hadn't realized I needed until the dust began to settle. I laid out the entire story for her, from the financial collapse 5 years ago to the forged loan application. She listened patiently, nodding, occasionally asking a clarifying question. What you're experiencing, Elena, Dr. Aris said during one session, her voice calm and empathetic, is the bittersweet taste of karmic homecoming. You've brought balance back to a deeply imbalanced system, but balance doesn't always feel good. It can feel like an amputation. You've cut out a cancer, but the wound is still fresh. It just feels empty, I admitted, looking out her office window. I got what I wanted. They're gone. But I'm alone. You're not alone, Elena, she corrected gently. You're free. And that freedom comes with a different kind of peace. It's not the peace of an unbroken family, but the peace of integrity. You chose yourself, and that's a powerful, necessary choice. Samantha finally broke down. Not to me, but to a mutual acquaintance who relayed the conversation. She didn't apologize. Not really. Instead, she blamed our upbringing, the pressure to succeed, the favoritism she claimed I received. It was a familiar refrain, a twisted narrative of victimhood that still avoided any personal responsibility. It was clear she hadn't learned anything, only felt the sting of consequences. Then, one afternoon, Paige called, her voice buzzing with excitement. Elena, you're not going to believe this. The reporter's story dropped. It's huge. It got picked up by a national site. My stomach clenched. National? Yes, it's all over the place. They used your story as the lead for a piece on financial abuse within families, how it's often hidden, and how victims are often shamed into silence. You're the symbol now, Elena, the daughter who evicted her whole family, the one who fought back. I hung up the phone, a strange mix of dread and vindication washing over me. I was a symbol, a cautionary tale. The woman who had chosen justice over blood. The cost of that justice was still being tallied, but the balance sheet was clear. I had won, but the victory felt heavy, tinged with the quiet hum of a house that was now truly, irrevocably mine and empty. The national story had dropped 3 months ago. My face, or at least a blurred version of it, had been plastered across news sites, a symbol of a daughter who fought back. It had been jarring, a final, public severing of ties. The initial shock had faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance. The house was different now. The silence was no longer deafening, it was a comfortable hum. I still owned the entire property, but I'd rented out the basement apartment to a quiet graduate student. It brought in a steady income, enough to cover the remaining property taxes and maintenance, and it filled the space with a gentle, unobtrusive presence. The top floor, my floor, was quiet. No more arguments over curtain colors, no more passive aggressive comments from my parents, no more the faint smell of Buster's dog food. Samantha, 29, was living with a friend awaiting her court date. Corey, 31, had moved back in with his parents in another state. His business venture completely collapsed. Their separation was final. My parents, Hazel, 58, and Jorge, 61, were living in a small rented apartment across town. My mom's health scare had subsided, but her spirit seemed broken. My dad, once the symbol of male authority, was now just a tired old man. I hadn't seen them much. The calls had dwindled to terse, infrequent updates from my dad. They still hadn't apologized, not truly. There was regret, yes, but no ownership of their actions. I visited my mom at the assisted living facility she'd recently moved into. It was a clean, functional place, chosen for its affordability. She looked smaller, frailer. She talked about the old days, about family, about how things used to be. I listened, offered polite responses, but kept my distance. The emotional well had run dry. I stayed for 20 minutes, then made my excuses. The visit was a duty, not a desire. I refused to stay long, refusing to fall back into the old patterns of emotional manipulation. One evening, a few weeks after that visit, I was sitting on my porch, enjoying the cool autumn air. The streetlights cast long shadows, and the sound of crickets filled the quiet. A car pulled up to the curb. It was Leandro, 36. He got out, a small smile on his face. Hey, Elena, just in the neighborhood, thought I'd stop by. Leandro, I said, genuinely pleased to see him. Come on up. He sat on the porch swing beside me, the chains creaking softly. We talked about inconsequential things at first, his business, my work. Then the conversation shifted, as it always did, to the elephant in the room. I saw the article, he said, his voice low. The national one. That must have been a lot. I nodded, looking out at the street. It was. It still is. People look at me differently now, like I'm some kind of avenging angel or a monster, depending on who you ask. And how do you feel? He asked, his gaze steady on me. I sighed, a long, slow exhale. Empty, sometimes, but also free. Doctor, Aris, my therapist, she calls it karmic homecoming. I guess I got justice. But it wasn't sweet, it was sobering. Winning sometimes just means freeing yourself, Leandro said, his voice thoughtful. It's not about getting even, it's about getting out of the cycle, out of the lies. I looked at him, really looked at him. His eyes, kind and understanding, held no judgment. You're right, I admitted. I fixed the locks on the house, but I also fixed the locks on my own life. I built a wall, I guess. But it was a necessary one. He reached out, his hand gently covering mine on the swing. Sometimes the strongest foundations are built after the old ones crumble, and sometimes those walls are there to protect the good things that are trying to grow. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the crickets chirping, the streetlights glowing. The house, my house, stood solid behind us. It was no longer a symbol of my family's betrayal, but a testament to my resilience. It was a home I had fought for, a peace I had earned. My silence was mistaken for weakness, but karma doesn't yell, it knocks, and I made sure everyone heard.